What made you decide to pick when you were choosing your motto for the year? I mean, I guess most people choose New Year's resolutions, which I stopped doing because that implies that you have something you need to change, and that's not always true. Sometimes it could just be a goal or an improvement. So I love how, or like self care, like getting a massage. People always think it has to be something just brutal, like court martial, and so I like that you took kind of a similar approach to that. What made you decide to come up with a theme for your year? And then how did you arrive at the theme you have?
Actually didn't come, it wasn't a New Year's thing, like a New Year's resolution or anything. It didn't come until the end of February. And the story behind that is I've had a lot of trauma that I've had to overcome in the last few years throughout my entire life. There's actually 30 years of trauma starting at like 12 or 13 that I remembered, went almost a year and worked through that and processed that. And then what that did was allowed the first 10 years of my life of even more traumatic experience that I had repressed completely at age 10 to now surface. And this was sexual abuse by a family member for 10 years. And it was, I mean, I thought I was at the low of lows with that 30 years. And then it was like my bottom low had a basement. My rock bottom had a basement when this came up. And I'm like, how do I get through this? But at that time, I already had the skills, I had the techniques, not all of them transferred completely, but I had already getting through 30 years of stuff where I knew I could do it. I knew I could do it, and I had to do it fearfully. It was terrifying, but it needed to be done. And I knew already to an nth degree of what life was like on the other side of trauma, what life, what was possible in my life once I got through that 30 years. And I'm like, oh, this is just 10 more years. I had to reframe it. This is just 10 more years, 10 more years, and you can get through it. And I had to do it fearfully. But with that, it opened up the possibility of doing things I never thought I could do before. In January, I spoke on a stage of 250 people, and I told that story of the first 10 years of my life. I had never spoken it, I had never written it, nothing. In February, I was part of an anthology. We had been working on this for 6 months, part of an anthology that was an Amazon #1 bestseller internationally, telling that story of how it came to be. And that terrified me. My family didn't know about what had happened, and there were now 7 billion people that could read about what happened.
So
And
that's how your family found out about it.
yeah, yeah, it was through the book.
Wow. Okay.
And it wasn't well received, and I knew it wouldn't be, right? And so after that, the motto was, you can do anything. But then I decided, you know what? I had such an amazing response from so many other people. After this conference, I had 4 women come up to me just absolutely sobbing and throw their arms around my neck and say, I've never met anybody else who's had a childhood like I have. And I said, yes, you have. You just don't know about it because we're not taught. We're taught to not talk about it because it makes other people uncomfortable. And so from that, I decided to speak on 50 events, 50 different platforms before the end of the year. And I don't care if they're Zoom, if they're in person, if they're, just, I do live event, I do all different kinds of things. And I said, I'm going to speak 50 times this year. And that terrified me even more. It was like that 10 years coming back. And so at the end of February, I said, I'm going to speak on 50 different events and I'm going to do it scared. And that just became my motto. And so for 2 months, it has been do it scared, but just do it.
What part of speaking is it, the speaking part or the telling your story part that is scary?
It was everything. And it's kind of warped a little bit in the 2 months where it doesn't have to be about my story, but I love talking about my story in the way that it gives other people hope. It gives other people courage. It allows other people to know that they don't have to carry this, but it is a very vulnerable topic. It's very vulnerable to speak about this family member who you revered and loved and adored. And in an instant, in your mind, it changed. And there's a lot of shame that came with it because I'm like, how can I not remember this? How do I not know this? How did I love this person for the rest of their life? Because they passed away 20 years ago. How did I love this person for the rest of my life and not realize this happened? But, and there's a lot of things I'm never going to get closure on from them that I have to find closure in myself. And I don't have to be those beliefs that I had that were formed by that. I don't have to take on those truths that were given to me by other people that played into poor me, poor me, poor me. I can make up whatever I want for me. And what I've decided to make up is that I'm a public speaker, that I'm an international publisher, that I can do whatever I want to. And maybe there's some fear with it. That's okay.
So when you accept that kind of that really touched me, that you realized that you weren't who people had outlined you to be. How did you kind of have that aha moment and then go, yes, I'm having the aha moment, I'm not, but then identifying who you were after that?
Was a process. I was working with a coach and they said to me, we had worked a couple of times before I had the aha moment of this is the belief I have about me. Where did it come from? Somebody said this about me, a bully. I was bullied, and so this must be true. That's what their belief was. Um, a friend, even as an adult, may have said, I get so frustrated with you just in a moment when about anything. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm frustrating. And I took that on. And after running that process on a few different beliefs or truths a
Yeah.
couple of times, it clicked. It clicked that every time we ran this, it was something I had gotten from somebody else and was holding on to. And we really worked through the whole, you don't have to believe this. Just because somebody else did doesn't mean you do.
Hmm.
And just because they may have been not in a good place themselves and said something out of frustration, or maybe you had been doing something that wasn't the best, doesn't mean that is perpetually who you are. It also came from remembering what this family member did to me. And my for 45 years I said this person was incredible. People still to this day will reach out to me who knew him and said, oh, I went by this place and it reminded me of him. Oh, he was such a great guy. Oh, you're so lucky to be his daughter. And I always thought that. And then all of a sudden this happened and I was like, he's the biggest piece of and my coach said to me one time, he goes, you told me all these wonderful things about him. And I said, yeah, but he did this. And he goes, no, and he did this. He did do these wonderful things. And he also did this beforehand. He did this when you were younger. As you got older, he did change and became this other person. And it was an and kind of a thing. And he did something bad and he was a good guy. And so I had to apply that to my own life and say, maybe I did this and I'm still a better person now. And I did this and I can do differently now. And so there were so many processes. I'm telling you, it took about 2.5 years for me to get to a place where I felt comfortable enough to be like, oh yeah, I'm okay. I'm all right. And I can make up these new beliefs. What do I want to make up about myself? And when you make those up about yourself, you live into those and become those.
That is so profound because I think that as a culture, we are taught that everything is just one, it is one thing. You are painted with one singular brush. You are blue or green or whatever. I love that you say two things can be true. This person, because none of us are a single persona. We all have varying degrees of different, personalities and that sort of thing. So I think it's unfair to think that, but yet we do. We paint people with one brush and think it's fair. So I
Yeah,
love that you make that point because that's a real big takeaway for me. I think I have a habit of doing that. Once I've labeled someone or cataloged them as being a gossiper or, that kind of thing, I don't see that they gossip, but they also come and do my laundry when I have the flu. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? And finding balance in that and then just kind of finding a safe place to have a friendship with that person where you just don't tell them things you don't want gossiped. Like,
exactly.
so I love that you
Exactly.
mentioned that.
Thank you. Another thing that I read something somewhere one time on Facebook, probably like 5, 6 years ago, that said just because I had an opinion once doesn't mean I have to have that same opinion now. Because as we grow, as we learn, as we change, then our perceptions can become different. Our beliefs about things around us can become different. And for me, I was, this trauma that I had when I was 12, when I got into my 20s, it really kind of, we talked about before we started recording about getting in our own way and putting that wall up in front of us. And I let this trauma get in my way. I was an absolute victim to it. And as people were getting married and having kids, and so that didn't happen for me. And I thought, what is so wrong with me? And I couldn't change these things about me that I saw as wrong. And I didn't know why. And I was stuck in a holding pattern for about 20 years until a friend of mine that was a dear friend, we met when we were very early 20s. I think he was 20 and I was 22. And I helped him change his life around in some ways. 2 years later, he got married and left. And 18 years later, we finally caught up again and saw each other. And in that moment, I realized I am the exact same person that I was when we met, and he's 20 years older. And I was like, that was a big realization to me of I am getting in my own way and I am staying stuck and I'm believing that I can't change. And so trying to go about catching up with who I should be now, a lot of my ideas changed, a lot of my concept, a lot of my perceptions changed. That's where the and came into play of I did believe this and I can believe this now. And it's where that growth comes in because you can open up your mind to other possibilities, not only for yourself, but of other people growing and maturing and changing as well.
So how do you go about, let's say someone is feeling like they maybe, let's just use like politics, like their parents have said, because we feel this way, you must feel this way. Or they're raised in a household where that was the commentary. And then now they're out on their own and they're feeling kind of torn to not maybe agree with that. How would you kind of help them give themselves peace and grace to explore that alternate? How do you change your mind midway?
It's for me, it's almost like compartmentalizing. So if we're using your example, you put your parents or your family and say, they believe this. And and what do I believe?
Love that.
What do I believe? And both things can be true at the same time. Both things can be okay at the same time. I did grow up with that black and white mindset that it's either right or it's wrong. It's black, it's white. And that and shift from the either or was massive. It was incredible because you can have two things be true at the same time. And society doesn't teach that. And it's a new thing to step into, but it's freeing. Oh, it is so freeing.
I was just about to say that's got to be so freeing to
It is.
realize that everything does, we don't have to play judge and jury and put everything in these individual boxes. It's okay to kind of have them coexist together and they're not going to rip each other's arms off and no one's going to have an injury. Like it's going to be okay for these things
Yeah.
to exist. But I never thought of the word and being so small, being so powerful. But the way you describe it, I have a whole new appreciation for it.
It allows anything to be possible in your world. It allows anything to to happen. You get to decide, and whatever the old is what it is, and whatever you want to be new is new.
And then you do the new part. That's what you do. Scared. That's what you do with bravery, is that new part.
Because we're so used to, oh, I have to do this because that's what I've always known, or that black and white thinking. And so stepping out of that's how you have that grace for yourself. Say, I'm going to do it scared. And if you're talking about something physical, like ways of thinking, if I want to choose this political party over this one, not quite as scary. But if you want to go into something and say, oh, for myself, I used to weigh over 400 pounds. I decided I wanted to run. And I'm like, that is terrifying to somebody who struggles to walk. It is terrifying. And I would go in I luckily live in a place that has a lot of state parks and trails and stuff. And I would go on these paths and I would literally walk and be like, I want to run. And it's such a small thing, but it was terrifying for me. And I finally one day was like, I'm going to run. And there's other people on these trails. And I'm like, I care, but I don't care what they think. And I still don't run. It's more of like a shuffle jog. And it's not graceful. It's not great. I mean, I can go like 50 steps and then I'm like, I need a 5 minute break. But it's something above what I've ever done before. And I took one of my nieces out with me one time. She's 10. And I said, okay, if anybody starts coming down the trail at us, we're going to stop. Just so you know, I'm going to stop. And somebody started coming down the trail. And so she stopped and I kept running. And I was like, oh, apparently I can do that too. Like you start being able to just do things without even having that knowledge. You naturally progress. And she goes, I thought we were stopping. And I'm like, so did I. I don't know. I don't know. But once you do something scared, the next time you do something that seems fearful, it's not as scary. And the next time it's a little bit less scary. And again, it gives you freedom.
And then you can amaze yourself at what you're
Yes.
able to do when you take those walls down, get out of your own way, and just accidentally versus saying, "Oh, well, no, I have to stop at this gear because I just can't hit that next gear, so I've got to stop there." If you're distracted or so forth, and you blow through it, and you're like, "Oh, I didn't just achieve it. I've now surpassed it." I think that's a great takeaway too, because so often I think we preset. I don't know if it's for self protection or to help save us from our own disappointment in ourselves, setting these predetermined boundaries when it's not necessarily true or necessary.
Limits on ourselves that aren't even there, but we create them. And if you don't create limits, you can do anything.
So true. So what is your plan? So you talked about kind of running and the bravery and doing that scared. What's like another thing that you're doing scared right now?
I will tell you, I'm cold plunging, scared.
You mean like the
Um,
little ice bathy thingies I see around?
yeah, I actually started doing it in Lake Michigan. I live right on Lake Michigan, and Lake Michigan, even though it's a lake, it's one of the biggest lakes in the world, and it has waves, right? And
Wow. Okay.
in the winter, they get so big and so strong that you can surf on them, right? So people surf out here, and in the winter, not this last winter, but the year before, I decided I'm going to start cold plunging, and I'm going to do it in Lake Michigan. And so I started getting in swimsuits, which is not comfortable for me at all. And as people are walking down the beach, like bundled up in hats and earmuffs and gloves and everything, here I am taking my clothes off and walking out into Lake Michigan. And people are just standing there with their phones. And I'm like, I don't know if anybody's going to save me if I die. And there were times where the waves were so big, I was like, I can't stand up. And people, this is going to be on the news. Great. Hey,
How long?
and
How long do you stay? Like, maybe break down for us what cold plunging is, because I'm sitting here just going through a reel of TikToks in my mind, and I just want. But then you mentioned waves. I'm like, okay, I need to get her to break this down for us.
So there's quite where I would go cold plunging in Lake Michigan. There was quite a bit a big sandbar, and so it wasn't. I couldn't just go straight down and straight back in. So I would go out to about thigh. It was thigh level, and then I would kneel down, and then I would just stand back up and walk back
Okay.
in.
Okay.
Right. I finally decided that I need to do it in something that doesn't have waves anymore. And so I actually bought a big cow trough, watering trough, and put that in my garage, and I have water in it. And so I'll just keep filling it up with colder water. Sometimes I'll throw some bags of ice in it and step into it. And even though it's private, and even though
Mm.
it's just this small, not as dangerous, it's still scary because it is so freaking cold. But I know how good it is for me.
What are the
And so
benefits? I was curious to kind of learn why it's worth it.
it's so good for inflammation. If anybody has inflammation, especially in their joints, it is so good for inflammation. There's so many different uses depending on how you do it. It can be good for weight loss. It can be good for anxiety. It actually, I will get in mine. So mine aren't as cold as they can be, like usually 40 degrees or lower. I'll usually get mine to like 55, between 55 and 62. And then I will actually sit in them for about a half hour and sometimes fall asleep. And then what that does is it relaxes me. But then when I get out, it gives me energy. It gets your blood flowing. It decreases any inflammation in your muscles, and you just have so much more energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I'm like, I kind of always file it under things of, I wish I could be that cool, hip person and do these things, and that's like on the list of things I want to do. But then I think about actually doing it and walking through what, okay, I get a big area, I get into super cold water. What's that going to feel like? And then what? And then what? So I kind of play that through in my mind. So I'm glad that you kind of broke down those curiosities, so we know
Yeah.
kind of exactly how to set it up and why to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, at first, it was just a challenge of just doing it. It was like one of those things that I'm like, if I can do that, I can do other things. And that's where the do it scared comes in because you put those walls up in your mind and you don't know what's going to happen, but you can become uncomfortable. You can become comfortable being uncomfortable. And so what you stated is so interesting because I used to be the kind of person that I couldn't take a step until I could see the end from the beginning because I didn't want to be surprised. I wanted to know exactly what was going to happen with everything I did. And there became so much joy in not knowing, in taking that first step and being like, all right, we're going to see how this is, how it turns out. Maybe it'll be great. Maybe it won't. I've heard stories when I was a kid of people who would go snowboarding and they would just get on the snowboard. They didn't know how to snowboard and they would just go and let's see what happens. And I didn't ever think that that was possible. But now I'm like, all right. When I first filled it up, it was my tub, it was winter. And so we just took snow and put it in there and let it melt. And then I got into it when it had, a lot of slush in it. And I'm like, I don't know how this is going to feel, but we'll see.
Now,
I have no
let's
idea.
talk about some things that you did, that you moved forward with, even though you were scared and they maybe didn't work out.
So I will tell you some of these speak at 50 events or 50 on 50 platforms. Some of those didn't work out well. Some of those, especially at the beginning, especially the ones I was doing live, did not go well. And I struggled. I stepped off of those after the event was over and I'm like, that was horrible. And I'm at number 4. We can't do 50. And I'm like, yeah, I can. I'll give you a specific example. And this actually just happened Thursday. So, a very good friend of mine has a podcast, right? He's been doing this for 6 years. It reaches so many people. He's an amazing guy. And so I was on his podcast and we were talking about how do you like live into attributes kind of a thing. And so he has talked about how he has this practice of writing words or sentences that are encouraging on his mirror in a dry erase marker. And I was telling him how I had gone through a book about a year ago and it had suggested 3x5 cards with attributes on it and put those up somewhere where you see them awesome. So I put them up around my bathroom. And so I started to say, and I look at those every day and I tap into them. And because there are some things, excuse me, that I wrote on there that have happened, that have been manifested through doing this. Pardon me. And I started to say, I look at these every day. And then I'm like, no, I don't. I really don't. I used to, I don't anymore. And so I was like, I look at these okay. And then I had to think about it. And I'm like, I look at these when I remember. And this is what I do with them. And then he called me out on that. And he said, we're gonna go back to that because you stopped yourself and you went back and said something that wasn't as positive. And I'm like, yeah, because I wanted to tell the truth. And he goes, why did you do that? And I said, because I'm human. Because I'm human. And I said, when I started with my coach, I thought the reason he coached is because he had all of this figured out and he doesn't deal with problems and he doesn't deal with issues and he knows exactly what to do because he has all these skills. And I learned very quickly from him that that's not true. Like he's still human, even though we know all of this stuff. And this is another place where I used to be very hard on myself. Even though I would know something and I would be human and still do something different than how I would like it to be, it was okay. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. It just meant that if I am choosing red all the time and I chose blue one time, it just meant I chose blue. Let's go back to choosing red. And so it was this perfect in the moment example of we're human.
Mhm.
We're human. And it doesn't mean anything about us at all.
I'm glad you gave that example because I could see me giving myself a hard time. Like, no, I always do this. And then I did this one. No, that wasn't because that's what felt right in that moment or that's what was applicable for that scenario. That's off script from where I am. And I'm going to stay on script, even if it doesn't necessarily apply to that unique situation. We just definitely don't give ourselves grace to be nimble. Maybe nimble is the word I'm looking for, or pivot with things.
But I lived under the mentality that you had to be perfect or you failed. I
Hmm.
mean, there was no in between. It was perfection
Yeah.
or failure. And I always failed because I wasn't, you can't be perfect as a human being. And so I lived this life of believing that I was a failure because no matter what I would do good, one thing that I would deem as bad or wrong or, shouldn't have done that, that meant everything else that I had done was nil and void. And again, and I did all of this good. I did one thing, and I did one thing that I prefer I wouldn't have done. And I can go back to doing what I wanted to do before.
I'm thinking like how many marriages can be saved right now. Like, yes, my husband cannot load the dishwasher correctly. And but he is really good at being a provider for our family. Like versus you're a failure because you can't load the dishwasher correctly. I think that I'm definitely, as we're talking about this, I'm guilty of kind of extrapolating those things just because you are a dishwasher loader failure. You are also a failure at understanding my emotions or understanding, like, and they're different.
Yeah, we put meaning as a society, we're taught to put meaning to things. If this happens, then this means this about you. Nothing means anything. It means I was human
Mhm.
and I lived how a human lives. And that's literally it. And that took me years to be able to take that off my own shoulders and be like, I don't have to hold anything over myself anymore. Now, there are times that you do things that there may be to a degree that you do have to be held accountable in some way, shape, or form by yourself or by others. And, not but, and it doesn't mean anything about you, who you are, what you can accomplish. It just is. That's what happened. Move on. And
I'm
it seems easy. It seems like it's easy for me, and it still isn't. It's still hard for me.
I'm thinking of just giving that, like writing on a card, I'm human and that's okay. And that terrifies me. Talk about do it scared. The just kind of playing it through in my mind, giving myself permission to be human makes me want to go run and hide under my bed because of the fallout from perfection. We're definitely we're supposed to, earn enough income to be respected, but not so much that we challenge the ego of our partner. We're supposed to be really good friends, but not so good that we look up that we're not authentic. It is hard to ride that human line.
It is. One thing that I will tell you about the practice of these attributes that are posted around my bathroom are I will tap into each one of them. So say one of them is leadership, for example, and say I want to be a leader in something in some way, some shape or form, whatever that looks like for me. And so what I do is I focus on that word, I close my eyes, and I tap into the feeling of if I was already a leader, what would that feeling feel like? And you create that and you get familiar with that feeling. And it's not going to happen in a moment, but it can happen fairly quickly depending on how long you do this or how long you spend doing this and how many times you do it. And if you do that every day, your body's going to get used. Your brain doesn't know if something you're thinking about is actually happening or if it's an imagination. So if you tap into that feeling, your body's going to get used to being in that feeling and it's automatically going to become a part of you. And you're going to automatically do those things that create that feeling of leadership.
So instead of dressing for the part you want, you're saying feel. Go ahead and start feeling as if you already have. So instead of dressing as the leader, start feeling like you're the leader.
I'm saying do both dress and
I love it. I
feel.
love there's and again. See, and there I was already just going back to habits, had to be one or the other. I had to either dress like the leader or start to feel like the leader versus doing both together. Wow. I am so glad that you shared this content because one little word and I'm already struggling with it and I've been in it with you here on the call for a little bit. I feel like this needs to become like an accountability pod or something that we have that we, as people listen to this podcast, they kind of check in and go, yes, I'm 2 days into being able to accept the word and, or I had a relapse. I did not accept and today. I'm back on day one. Because it can open so many doors, but then also be so scary to do that.
Yeah. And can I, if it's okay, I want to point something out that you
Please
just
do.
said. When you mess up, you don't have to go back to day one. It's just the next day.
I love
The
this.
next day, it does. That's not that you're not in the perfection. You don't have to be perfect in it. And if you're not perfect, you failed. So you have to start over. You just keep going. Just keep going. It's easier said than done, but it becomes so much easier. I will catch myself in the and a lot of times when I'm talking to somebody, especially if I have to have a difficult conversation where somebody said something and I felt a certain way, and you'd be like, you did this, but I da 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 da. You did this, and I felt this. And it relaxes the other person. It doesn't put them on the defense so quickly. And in a way, it relaxes you as well. And you're saying, I can speak my truth and I can share with them what I want to do. And the and is powerful. It is so powerful. And I will catch myself. I've already caught myself in this discussion where I said but, and then I'm like, we're going to go with and, because it's two truths at the same time.
And I love that you bring up that again, that's I just did, I don't want to say a social establishment, but we just naturally feel if we are
Yes.
trying to achieve a goal of doing this attribute or a feeling or thinking in this way, and we have an error, there has to be that punishment of going back to day one. And I love just how free it is that
It
you
is.
just keep going. Just okay, whatever. Yesterday happened. Tomorrow's a new day. Roll with it.
Yeah. And I lived, like I said, 45, 46 years. This isn't natural for me. This is something that I develop, and I'm still developing it on a daily, because I know a lot of times, like when I listen to podcasts or I listen to recordings, I'll be like, well, this person had it easier. This person doesn't understand, the kind of life I had that has created the way that I have to be. Mm-mm. It's a journey. It's like climbing a mountain without a top. You're
Mhm.
always climbing, you're always working. There is no perfection that you get to. Even with this trauma that I've overcome, like horrific trauma that most people don't ever have to go through, I still get triggered from time to time. And it's okay, because it's just what happens. We're human. And so you just take it for what it is. You sit in it for a couple of minutes or a day or a week or a month or whatever you need. And then you just keep going forward, because that happened. It is what it is. And now you're creating new, and it doesn't have to be controlled by anything behind you.
I just felt
So
myself just take like the biggest exhale subconsciously because I've been kind of carrying this thing that I want to improve upon each day. And I didn't improve it today. I actually made a mistake when that situation arose again. I did not act how am wanting to act. And I just had this tension. And hearing the way that you articulate it, that, okay, today's done. Tomorrow is a new day. I'm just going to start and try again tomorrow. It just, I don't know, it came out of nowhere. So I would definitely just encourage people to allow yourself to feel that, like to actually, I thought that kind of subconsciously while we were chatting, and then I gave myself permission that it's okay. I mean, there's no pack of stormtroopers outside our house that are going to run in and be like, no, you have to, that so much of this we going back to kind of what we started the podcast with, so much of this we do to ourselves. We either put it on ourselves or we block ourselves from it versus removing those.
it's a process, it's a step by step. And my guess is that you're probably going to feel that again before the day is over. And that gives you another opportunity to just say, all right, you just put it into practice. I unconditional love was not a thing for me growing up. I never knew that it was a real thing. And once I realized that I can love anybody else for anything that they do, I can love myself for anything that I do too. Absolutely. Unconditional love is extended, but it's also turned inward. And once you can learn to love yourself unconditionally, you don't hold things over yourself like that. as much anymore. It gets easier and it gets easier. And you just realize I'm human. I'm human. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely perfect. We're perfectly imperfect, every single one of us.
I love this. I can definitely see how this would be just the few topics we touched on just today. I could see how those would reflect months of inner work for someone to kind of work through. And I can only imagine doing those things plus the work of actually the trauma recovery, and kind of just getting through that. So I'm so glad that you shared these because it's like, and I took a big relief, just being like, it's okay to start tomorrow. I'm not a failure. I failed today and I'm going to do better tomorrow. Like but whereas I would have said before, I failed today, thus I am a failure. Thus, I'm most likely going to fail at it again tomorrow because that's my history of being a repeat failure. And so I'm already kind of at this place versus what I felt when I thought that was, okay, tomorrow's a new day. Like I'm going to try again.
Way of thinking puts another brick up in that wall, puts another brick up in the wall. The fact that you failed at something today means nothing about you at all. Not at all. So you're just as amazing and incredible as you've always been, doing the best that you can with the knowledge you have. And when you learn more knowledge, you do better. You not even better, you do different. And when you don't, it's okay. You just keep going on in that. So
I love everything about this. How can folks follow you? How can they reach out to you if they have something they want to chat with you about deeper? What are your channels?
So my business is called Resilience Mind and Body Coaching because I fully believe that the body and the mind are connected, and I love to help people holistically for both. So resilience mind and body coaching.com is my website, or resilience mind and body coaching at outlook.com is my email. I'm also under my name. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, I'm on a bunch of different things. If you look on Amazon, if you look at my name, you can find the book that I'm in, and that will tell part of my story. So I'm all over the place.
I love this, and I'll get all that kind of together and in the show notes so it's easy for folks to see. And we're trying to put downloads together that correspond with podcasts. So as our listeners hear something that resonates with them, if they need more collateral to kind of just support their unpacking or their execution of that concept, we're trying to give them that content too. So we'll connect with you on that. But I never know what my takeaway is going to be when I do a talk with someone. I kind of have an idea sometimes just based off the content. They're going to teach me how to paint a house. Okay, I'm going to learn how to paint a house at the end, like whatever the content is. But this was one it opened my eyes to a lot of work I need to do inside. So I'm glad that you shared this, that you're vulnerable enough to share these concepts and to kind of get us thinking and questioning ourselves about them, and then kind of challenging, like, okay, let's decide what you want to do and make changes, and that's okay, to kind of move forward w- while you're scared. It's okay to move forward while you're scared, and it's okay to move forward imperfectly. I love that you shared those messages.
Thank you for creating the space where people can share the things that are going to help other people, because I think that's the biggest part of my life right now is trying to serve others, to not have to suffer. I say suffer, a lot of it is self-inflicted, but the same way that I did. And now that I know better, I don't want to say better, now that I know different, I want everybody else to know different. So thank you for creating a space for this.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. I love this. I do. I'm looking forward to getting all these out so folks can listen, and then seeing how the world responds to, just this space that we've created, and then what they choose to do with it and the impacts it has. And I'm really looking forward to like a year from now where folks are sharing their stories and their positive and negative, their successes and failures of trying to execute things that are talked about through the podcast. I'm just really excited to hear all those stories. But
I'm
it was
excited
great
about
to
that
meet
too.
you. It was great to connect with you today, and I will keep you posted as we get all these edited and posted online, so you can share on your socials and we're sharing ours. And I just really valued our time today.
You as well. Thank you again. I
Sure.
really appreciate it.
Well, all right. Well, I'll chat with you later, hopefully.
Take care, my dear.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye bye.